Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Sterling and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Sterling. And Bill, we set up at the end of our last episode, which was about the literalist, that really there's a close tie to reverse entitlement. And I'm actually excited to talk about that today and really explore that, because I don't think that everyone is really aware of what drove a lot of the people at the Capitol to do some of the things they did, or one of the things that drove them to it, right?
Yeah. I think the hardest part about this, our last discussion about the literalists, I'm taking something literally. And then once they take it their way, this is the way I think every other person should take this. That's what the literalist does, is saying, I'm taking this literally. It makes it hard to either have perspective or even to tell a joke about something without offending somebody. So when the literalists come into play, it becomes not fun, because as soon as there's one complaint, there's the belief that, I am going to piss off other people because this person said this thing. Many comedians do not do the college circuit anymore. The reason why they don't do the college circuit is their brand of humor or things is going to offend somebody on campus, whether it's liberal or conservative. So what happens is all you got to do is take a loud version of a group of students, and then they get to cancel, promote, disempower this person that's on quote unquote their campus, instead of going like, well, this person meets certain needs of ours, and if you'd like to attend this thing, great, but for those of you who don't want to attend these things, well, then don't attend these things, because I'm guessing that Jerry Seinfeld is going to do this, Chris Rock is going to do this. It doesn't mean Bill Maher is going to say this, and we invited him to things because there is a good, great, or larger part of the population that's in agreement with this funny view set. Now, some of you that are going to Berkeley might not want to have Bill Maher on here, and you're going to make a noise about that because he didn't do this thing and this thing and this thing. Well, he doesn't seem like he's your cup of tea, but it's not in alignment with having different voices come on at different times. What's happening is the concept of the cancel culture that you and I talked about a little bit, to this. And then, well, what does the canceling mean? Well, I'm entitled, and my voice has more weight than your voice. And my voice has such an importance to it that, and this thing is so wrong from their viewpoint, I am going to make noise and get other people to march on this, to speak up on this, to make a difference on this, and we're going to push on this issue. So what winds up happening is that there's the constant threat that a small issue can turn into a big issue very quickly. A small truth could become a bigger truth when it's really just a small truth.
Yeah, boy, I mean, you can understand how if so many of these people actually believed the election was stolen, if they really
Right.
believed that narrative, then you can understand how they'd be so angry.
That's right. And you can definitely empathize with, oh my gosh, you were fed this message. Certain other people in leadership did not deny the message. Certain other number of people supported the message. And if they got elected to leadership and they voted or was a part of my party, then there must be something there.
And so then that probably contributes to them feeling entitled, right?
That's right.
And while it's that, it's interesting because often people from the more conservative side of the political spectrum often talk about entitlements as a bad thing, right? Entitlements with government are bad, like welfare and Social Security and Medicare and some of these things, right? And entitlements are handouts from the government. It means that there's government has too much power, all this sort of stuff. But now they're saying, hey, I'm entitled to go storm the Capitol because something's going on here that shouldn't be going on. And if I don't do something about it, who will? Right?
Yes. And all you got to do is get a husband and wife talking about that all day, watch one Fox News things. Both of them are in agreement and they're bantering themselves back and forth. And they says, you know what? We have to drive. We have to drive. We have to drive. We have to drive to the Capitol. They need our help. They really need our help there. Oh my gosh, the president's outside. We're listening to him. Oh my gosh, listen to all these other people reinforcing this president message. They need our help. These bad people, Pence included, have got to go. And, it's okay if we do violence. Let's suppose we talk about a victim. Well, each of us as human beings have had loss, small, medium, and large losses. And as soon as we start pointing out a story of it being somebody having a victim or a terrible experience, a human being does this sentence. Oh yeah, I see that. You want to hear my victim story? Let me tell you my victim story. So it becomes, who's the victim? I'm the victim. And this is how I'm the victim. And listen to my story, my victim story. My victim story is worse than your victim story. Now I'm looking sideways. I'm going like, that's not a debate. There are two victim stories. There is the victim of the loss of the middle class, which is different than the victim story of job and employment suppression in people of color. Those are two different victim stories. But what winds up happening is the brain doesn't talk about them separately. It talks about them the same. My need for justice wasn't met. My need for fairness wasn't met. Therefore, I am entitled to justice and fairness. Justice and fairness looks like I get to break into the Capitol, and fairness looks like I get to put my feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. This is my desk, the guy says. I'm going like, it's like, wait a minute, hold on a second. I think the need for fairness and justice isn't quite working out in the correct perspective here. It's not your desk. You didn't run. You weren't appointed. You didn't work with. You didn't follow the rule of law like she did to get her spot. She's the one who worked on getting her career to be the speaker the way she got it to be. That's what she did.
It's very interesting. This really explains why somebody would stride prominently in front of somebody's cell phone camera carrying the Speaker of the House's lectern.
That's so perfect, Tom. That's an entitlement piece. I have this because my voice is equal to her voice. Now, it is equal from a vote perspective. She only gets one vote and you only get one vote. She has a set of words that she's going to say in order to let people know, hey, vote for me because I'm in alignment with what your words, as well as the complexity of this system, the American system of one thing meets one need for a person and it doesn't meet the need for another person. Whereas this other thing gets their need met and this other person gets this need met. And that's a little bit about what the give and take is. But regrettably, the relationship between the literal mind and the entitlement mind causes people to say, literally, the president said, okay, go down to the cow, and that he was going to be there.
Yeah, he said you've got to be strong if you're gonna take your government back. You've got to show strength. I mean, and what's really been a bit frustrating to me, Bill, is to see certain people on social media saying, show me the words, show me where the president cited this, show me where he actually said, go break into the Capitol and arrest Mike Pence and arrest Nancy Pelosi. Show me where he did that. And then I'm willing to see that he incited violence. But it doesn't have to be literal. It doesn't have to be like that. The words that the president said really matter, even if they are not literal. You've got to look at this from a bigger picture, don't you?
Yeah, it's really a physiological thing. It's like, not only do words matter, but the absence of words matter. It allows the person to fill in. You know, they looked all around for writing from Hitler to his generals about setting up concentration camps. They looked all over the place for anything written. Was there any written command? Did Hitler start this? Did he say anything specific? And the answer was no, he didn't. He didn't say it directly, literally, at least from the historical standpoint. But in private, he would say, hey, we've got this problem over here. And then all of a sudden, the literalist says, oh, I need to fix that problem.
Well, or that, you know, things happen and he doesn't condemn it, or he, you know, it's what you don't say that also has an impact, or also just the combination of many things. Some the president may have said, some Rudy Giuliani may have said at that same speech, some other speakers said. When you combine them all together,
right,
this serves to, you know, tee up the ball and for the crowd there, and it's inviting them to come take a swing at it.
That's correct. Each one of those people have a perspective of boosting dopamine and cortisol and adrenaline inside the listener, the purchaser. They were purchasing the message. So Don Jr. says this little small thing. Rudy Giuliani says this other small thing. Let's do trial by combat. It's like,
yeah, wasn't that Rudy Giuliani said that? Trial by combat really is, there's not a lot of ambiguity there.
Well,
what does combat mean? I mean,
and the weird part of it is one of the congressmen got up and said, when the president said, go down there, it's nothing more than political hyperbole. I'm going like, not in that setting. It's not. If you were in the middle of Salt Lake City and said, let's go down there, we would take it as hyperbole, because they're not going to just let's go down there.
Yeah, you can't get there in the period of time. You can't get across the country, right?
Let's just get there. Well, then you could say, well, I'm really meaning to say, let's just get there is, I mean, for you to contact your congressman or your senator to get there, because we're not flying there or we're not walking there. So it's the attempt to minimalization of communication is disheartening, because again, it The literalist goes, everybody knows this is hyperbole. And the entitled person says, this is my calling card to get my need for fairness and justice met. See, there's the physiological shift from one need to another, but that's not what they talk about. It's like, no, it wasn't really literal. Well, it was from the perspective of entitled fairness, justice, integrity, election integrity, because they're not embodying the truth or getting messages of truth. So I feel extremely disheartened and extremely exasperated when it looks like that we're not going to have straight talk and honest talk about the election numbers for about a year, unless Trump says, listen, everybody, I now see, and I was provided definitive evidence that Joe Biden had this amount of votes in these states, and the information that I was given was incorrect. I was given this information. People told me these messages, but I want to let everybody know that those things are not true. I found out, my team did its research, and we came up with the best answer, and we found out the people that were giving me mixed messages and how that all got out of hand. Is he going to say any of that? No. That's why it's going to take a year initially to get back to truth regarding the election numbers. It's not even close.
The election numbers, and I wonder how long it's going to take to get back to truth for all these people who, you know, the mob that stormed the Capitol. I mean, these people are going to face some very real consequences in a way that they've never faced consequences before being a supporter of the president.
No, they haven't. And it's the consequences are going to be dealt out in the following way. The FBI shows up at the thing and says, listen, we have your picture here. You're going to get a year or two in jail. This is what the charges are going to be. We're going to haul you down through it. Oh, by the way, you seem like a good person. Do you know anybody else that was there? Because anything else that you post or anything positive things that you post will look good at you before you get to trial in the next year or two. They're going to go like, what do I need to go to do to get out of jail? Turn in my neighbors, turn in the worst actors. And, you know, all that stuff is Americans against Americans, but also really to try to find out who are the primary feeders of these messages. Who's feeding it? Who's the primary feeding it message?
Well, and even if they do, you know, come to a different understanding, express remorse, there are things that are going to happen. These people are going to be convicted felons, a lot of them. They're going to be on the no-fly list for a long time to come. Talk about, you know, not wanting to have your freedoms taken away. I mean, my goodness, can't be going to New York from California for a weekend event. You know, I mean, how are you going to do that?
And they can't move around the nation, and they can't go. It's so funny. We see China is doing that social behavior measuring through overt surveillance and data tracking on their people. It's like that's like way scarier than this one is. This one is, you happen to get caught, you're now going to, like a 15-year-old, lose your car for a week, lose your travel for a year, because you're a 15-year-old. And what you did with your 15-year-old mindset was break into the Capitol building, is what you did with your 15-year-old mindset. Now, I tend to put my need for humor into our podcast, Tom, but really, if we're being compassionate and empathetic, is that when when the cheerleader is on the sideline, when when we're trying to get the fans to get inspired, the fans get riled up. Why? To cheer for their team, to have a collective experience of winning, to play by the rules at a football game, to a basketball game, to put talent and skill against talent and skill. That's what we look to do. So this makes it interesting because, well, you're not going to win. In fact, most sports teams, except for one, win the Super Bowl, lose the Super Bowl, lose on their way there. They're all, well, oh yeah, that's right. There's 32 teams and only one of them gets to be the winner at the end of the year, the champion, if they get to that game. Meanwhile, there were 8 games that to me looked like really Super Bowl quality over the last. It's like, wow, these are great.
My gosh, often one of the best games that, is not the Super Bowl happens on the way to it. And everyone's like, yeah, that was really the Super Bowl. The winner of that was going to win the rest in a walk. Right. That happens a lot. I remember a couple of years ago when the New England Patriots won in 2018, that was not the game I hoped it would be. It was kind of a letdown. I wanted Drew Brees and Tom Brady to play each other in the Super Bowl. And that was the year that New Orleans really should have been there if it wasn't for a no pass interference call.
Oh God, that's
just
so funny.
Saying.
Notice that fairness and justice just showed up in our conversation. Tom, well done. I mean, that's what the bias validating mind does, is it looks for that piece and the entitled mind. So over the last 30 years, there has been an assault on poor people. There's been an assault, a media support, small seeds, small messages of these people are getting your tax dollars. Instead of the reality is that we're taking tax dollars to shore up the weakest among us. We're putting them through hoops. We're showing them a path off of welfare. At the same time, the assault, there was literally, oh my God, what are they using that money for? They're using that money to buy a refrigerator. I'm going like, yeah, they're using the money to buy a refrigerator. I would like that American to have a refrigerator. I would like them not to go without a refrigerator. What are they going to put in it? Food? Yes, they're going to put food in it. I'm interested in them putting food in it. I sort of, if I'm living in this rich country, I'd like to take some of my money and give it to that person and let somebody else handle it so that they have foundation of stability, of certainty, ability, and experience of life, instead of toiling with somebody on their neck, or standing on their foot, or tying one hand behind their back. Any other metaphors you could throw in here? It's like, so it is exasperating. It is.
It is
and
exasperating.
That's what the entitlement mindset does, is it creates a series of messages that says, this person's entitled, they're bad. And then it gets to that point, and then reverse entitlement it shifts over to say, not Black lives matter, all lives matter. That's an entitlement sentence. And the entitlement is life is to be treated equally. Well, over here is life isn't being treated equally. There needs to be work on that group or that group of individuals in order to have them see that all lives matter. But that's really unsettling because, you've got to stay with and really kind of stay with the fight of keeping biases in our own belief structures to get hijacked. Because they can in a second. So Tom, tell me what are your thoughts about like identity? Can you see how identity kind of this fueling of identity got kind of like really riled up in these things. What would you see would be
Well,
like?
yeah, I mean,
Is there
it
some
definitely
cool
did, and it feeds into the entitlement or reverse entitlement, as the case may be, because if you heard, if you've watched some of the videos from that day on January 6th at the Capitol, so many of them are so unsettling. But there is one in particular that you can really hear some of these protesters who started out as protesters, peaceful protesters, but eventually yelling at the Capitol Police and saying, "The president invited me. Trump invited me. We are allowed to be here. We're allowed to go into the building." I mean, this was the messaging. You can hear them voicing this very strong belief. I'm invited. I'm allowed to be here. Now,
and the
yeah.
practical imagination of that invite inside the person's mind would not get satisfied. Watch until what? Watch what I'm going to say. This is going to be so upsetting. The thing that comes into the person's mind is, we're going to go down there. We're going to let your representatives know that we are here. You're basically saying your voice is going to be heard. Now, that person trying to get past the Capitol Police is motivated by identity, support, justice, fairness, their version of truth, the belief of elections been stolen, and the fantasy is that human being, that woman or guy saying the president invited us, is thinking in their head that they're going to be allowed on the floor of the Senate, floor of the Congress, and they're going to get a chance to speak to the other Congress people, and they're going to get a chance to speak to the other senators, and the senators are going to listen to them. Now, this is problematic because you're literally taking a person's belief and bias and leading them off a cliff where they've broken the rule of law. They've came and had the experience that I can say or do anything I want, just like the president does. This is, again, problematic because if you send a threatening tweet to somebody and that person says, this is a credible threat, the police officers will show up at your door.
Sure they will.
They'll say, wait a minute, it says here that you are going to kill blah, 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 blah. It says it on the text. We want to see if that's true or not. Or did the person make it up or whatever?
Well, and let's not forget, Bill, lives were lost at the Capitol that day. There is a Capitol Hill police officer who was hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, and he died from those injuries. There was a woman who was shot by a Capitol Hill police officer because of the threat that was posed. And, at first, Bill, I had to say, some of the early videos that came out of that, I wondered about the circumstances of that and was it justified and all that. And I got to tell you, more and more of these videos have come out with how forceful this mob was, pushing their way into that building, crushing, hurting another Capitol Hill police officer who's pinned between the doors, people trying to pull his gas mask off his face as he's doing. I mean, this was a brutal fight. And can you just imagine, talk about reverse entitlement and entitlement, how different it would have been, how many more lives would have been lost had this been a Black Lives Matters protest of people of color pushing their way into the Capitol? There would have been a lot more shots fired, don't you think?
Oh yeah. I have a general sense and agreement that there's a justification. Yes, the officers felt threatened and they fired back. Now, think about that sentence. The officers felt threatened. They saw people with guns and they fired back. Can you? I'm trying to think
back?
Of they fired.
Yeah, they fired.
They fired.
Yeah.
They just fired. Of course, the crowd's going to fire back, but they fired. Many people, if it was a black crowd, would go like, Oh, yeah, I can see how those officers are feeling threatened. Yes, it was really important for them to protect themselves. And yeah, they had to use it. And some people did die because they felt threatened. And the officers were just protecting themselves.
Right.
Now, as soon as that one officer that there was one a clip where there's one officer that was getting beaten outside, I can see, and many judges would acquit an officer saying, yeah, I saw this guy kicking my colleague, so I shot him because I was trying to save my colleague's my fellow officer's life. And the judge goes, yep, that's called the protective use of force. You saw somebody else being killed, and so you shot at the perpetrator. If that is not in a mob, yeah. If it's in a mob and the other mob people have guns, probably not a good idea to shoot the person. But sorry, fellow officer, you may get beaten, and I hope you don't die. Very, very difficult situation for us to talk through. Empathy and compassion, what it does in the middle of this, saying, listen, this mob is coming. We need to do something to meet the need for protection and physical safety for the congressmen and the senators inside. What's the planning for that?
Well, there wasn't much of a plan of that. It seemed there was a plan, though, because people went in there with, heavy duty zip ties as if they were going to apprehend people. I mean, there's a lot that's still to be revealed about the intent and what happened there. But this reverse entitlement, I think, is at the root of a lot of it, in addition to obviously the words that were spoken to incite this kind of behavior.
I'm trying to imagine and provide empathy for, in this moment, the image of the guy sitting in Vice President Pence's seat. I'm trying to imagine that. How does he feel? Delighted, energized. What's his need? Fairness, justice, being seen, being heard. Contribution to the president, the one he voted for. His identity is being met. But notice that even though I can see the motive and see how good he feels about that moment, that he got there to that place, that's not the way that we choose to express our leadership structure based on the Constitution. It's we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. This is the structure we set up to do that. Not we, the people, entitlement, have to fight for our need for being heard violently. See?
Yeah, that doesn't really
work. Resonate, because that doesn't really work, because it's not we, the people, in order to get my needs met at everybody's expense. It's really problematic. So, again, really troublesome.
It is. And I know this isn't like a happy feel-good episode, Bill, but there's a lot of serious things going on in our country. And I think it's really important to try to, think through these things and help others think through them as well. And with the goal of trying to get to a better place where we can, have productive, safe conversations about these things. I'm sure a lot of us and a lot of our listeners out there are experiencing every day messages on social media that seem over the top, things to disagree with, and are very troubling and hard to see and listen to.
Yeah, I can empathize with the helplessness of somebody that thought that they were getting their need for identity met. They were sent by the president. All of a sudden, they get to the airport and they're on the no-fly zone. How helpless they felt, how disheartened. I can judge them and say they're being a whiner, or I can judge them and say, didn't they see this coming? And the answer is no, they didn't see it coming. They were unaware that by supporting the president in this way, it wasn't supporting themselves at all. And he ain't going to save them. You know, I'm sorry, you're too small on the thing. I just needed enough votes. I just needed enough of your votes to get elected. And what a ride it's been. It's very disheartening. But it's because that human being had so much investment and so much energy and passion towards the president. And here's even the sadder part about it. If the president took any of his skills and abilities of marketing and put them to deal with the pandemic, he would have another 4 years, be hailed as a collaborative, cooperative president, dealt with a major existential crisis in a very commanding and grounded way.
Nope. No doubt. I agree 100%.
So sad. Yesterday we hit the largest total, by the way.
Of coronavirus deaths per day. Yeah. Isn't it about 4,000 or over 4,000, something like that? Yeah. It's terrible.
So Tom, I think the next thing that we do is maybe talk about how can we, talk about these issues with, it looks like language wise, it's one, we're fighting this battle one hand tied behind our back. How can legislators talk about these issues in a more effective way? How can journalists talk about them in a more effective way? And deal with how do you talk about reverse entitlement? Because I've been messaged into entitlement. And now how do I get messaged into equality? And that's got to be one of the things that we got to keep our eyeballs on, because the divided nation has to start doing some things together. And I think Joe Biden just invited us for a day of mourning with all the people that have died for coronavirus from 2020. There's a day of mourning sometime that's going to, and that is called the start. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter who you are. One thing is that you've lost somebody with COVID. We need a national day of mourning. What are we going to mourn? We're going to do candlelight vigils. We're going to look at the people we've lost and then do our best not to have any more deaths. Now you got a path to unity, but
sure.
I mean, it's not working the other way. All right. Well, more to come on this, Tom. Thanks everybody for listening. And Tom, you and I got to remind our listeners that I have the book of emotional sobriety that's coming out this year, and that Communication U about how to learn how to speak like this. I think we need to include that message so people know to follow up on this, and we'll talk further about that, moving forward.
Sounds great, Bill. Yeah, everybody can find information about Communication U from the website we always talk about, purchasingtruth.com. There is navigation to Communication U. That's all a part of billsturley.com. So please check that out. And yes, we will continue to make sure everyone's aware. Thanks so much, Bill. Great talk today.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.